Okay, so basically, number one, I want the young people to connect because I'm a young director. So, no, that's not the reason. The thing is, uh, see, I believe that cinema, especially films, are modern literature, and you consume more information through audiovisual medium than any other medium. Unfortunately, in India, we never took audiovisual medium very seriously. We used it primarily for very low degree entertainment. But I realized, being a student of communication, I realized that cinema can be used as soft power of India and also for uh, creating awareness. As a young person, I didn't know so many things about our history, about our current politics, even now. Because India, whichever government comes, doesn't matter, irrespective of which ideology or this thing, the system is such uh, that there is a kind of a censorship. You can't say this, you can't do that, you can't. There are lot of restrictions. So therefore, young people don't get to know lots and lots of facts. So that's why I decided I'll make this trilogy about Indian democracy. Okay, just to give you a little background, you've seen the film yesterday, so you know, but people, to their advantage, for their benefit, Indian emblem, if you look at it, you see three lions. So fourth lion you don't get to see. So I said, what are these three lions? Why do we have three lions? This was in 2012 or 13, I think, when we announced this trilogy. So I said the first most important thing for a democracy is truth. So the first lion stands for right to truth. He's going to protect our right to truth. The second lion is going to protect our right to justice, because without truth you can't have justice. And why do we need truth and justice? So that you can live a life of dignity. There is a value of life, and there's a right to life. That's why you need justice for life, nothing else. So the third one is right to life. So the first film I made was the Tashkent Files, which was about the death of second Indian Prime Minister, the controversy around it. Um, Everybody said that nobody is going to watch it. Young people will never watch it. I said, why? So all the studios told me, no, no, who cares about 4 feet prime minister. And ऐसा kurta pajama pehante हैं, nobody cares about him. The young people won't see it, and young people are the majority of the audience. And there is no song, there is no jokes, there is no entertainment, no fight, everything. 9 old people are sitting in one room and just discussing some, inane politics. So why anybody would be interested? I was convinced that the young people are going to watch the film. The reason is because I have also been young and I'm still young. But when you have a young mind, you are curious. You want to know. You want to know what is beyond those mountains, right? You question, you experiment, you are rebellious. And somebody needs to give you that information. Somebody needs to give you those facts. But nobody does it because somewhere there is an assumption, because we have made movies like Student of the Year and all those movies, people think that all the young people are very frivolous, they are superficial, all they care about is playing volleyball, basketball, and flirting with young girls. But that's not true. You know. Uh, so with that assumption, I could have failed also. After a lot of struggle, the film released finally in 2018. You won't believe it, it became a sleeper hit of that year. Sleeper hit means when nobody expects a film to become a very big hit and it becomes a hit, then it's called a sleeper hit. So it became one of the biggest sleeper hits of that year. You won't believe it, that almost 70% of my audience was young people of India. You know. And same thing with the Kashmir Files. Okay, Kashmir Files, why I go to so many universities? Because again, young people are watching it, they wanted to know. Then they go back, they do research and stuff like that. And this film also I made with the assumption that young people want to know the truth of our history. And I'm surprised that the young people don't know that Bengal was divided twice. They don't know. I was in Calcutta yesterday. I was telling in some last night we had some event. I was telling them I was in Calcutta, just to now I'll finish it. But I was in Calcutta, and there's a National Museum heritage building that was the first museum created by the British in India. A beautiful building, extraordinary building, and very big campus they have. So in the courtyard, some 3 to 5,000 students, young people had come, and the first floor, it was flooded with wherever you see, they were all young people. So I was the keynote speaker, and I was talking about the great people of Bengal, and I I saw a lot of blank faces. They were not relating to it, as if I was talking about some aliens. Then I said, Do you guys know that Bengal was divided twice? Very few hands came. Out of 4 or 5,000 students, only 10 or 15 hands came up. Then I asked them about Direct Action Day. You won't believe it, very few hands came up. So that's when I realized it's very important to tell the story because they don't know. And when they don't know, they want to know. Somebody has to tell them.
So you already explained how the Bengal FIles fits in with the strategy and when they had to explanation. And what do you think is the reason why people, younger students from small town colleges in India, there's a lot of reaction there, even with the Kashmir Files, even with this Mori. Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think younger people in colleges, campuses are inspired to react and they think it's important to talk about it? Why do you think that's happening?
In India, I don't know why, small town, middle class, um, there's a tendency to look down upon these small town, middle class people. I'm a small town, middle class person. I grew up in places like Gwalior, Jabalpur, Bhopal. Very, very small town they used to be at that time. Very small town. I come from middle class family. So in India, nobody cares about them because perhaps they are not, um, they don't have purchasing power. They are not smart buyers. They are not vote banks. There is some reason because see, if you have market power, then everybody cares about you. It's only when you are meek and feeble in the marketplace that nobody cares about you. Um, but they are very smart people. I'm sure most of you are small town middle class people. Nobody here looks like very elite to me. So I can relate with you. You are like me. So, but but we are doing very well in life. And where are we doing very well in life? In STEM, in research, in humanities, in all these kind of things, creativity. We may not be great entrepreneurs because we never got those opportunities. So I travel at least 10, 15 days in small towns to give speeches everywhere. And I relate with young people a lot. I spend a lot of time with them. If you go to my social media, I have tons of videos with young people, interaction. Wherever I find them, I talk. Normally, no film director will come to speak to a bunch of 10, 12 people, drive all the way 40 minutes here. I have to go, now I have another event. I have to go 1.5 hours. Why will I do that? I I've realized in life it doesn't matter whether you have 10,000 people or you have 10 people. Okay. Even if you can influence one mind, even if you make one person aware about something, that is the beginning, and that's my job. I don't care about numbers ever. All I care about is whether you are making an impact or not. So I was unfortunate that when I was growing up, somehow people didn't tell us about these facts. I didn't know about partition. I didn't know about Kashmir. I knew vaguely that something is there, but I didn't know in mainstream narratives. So that's why I decided to make my films mainstream narrative. And I'm glad that so many young people are liking it. Yesterday, it was so many young people were there. The other day, I was in Los Angeles, full of young people. A lot of young people are coming, and which is a good sign.
So you did bring up college students and their impact in studying and how they're doing now in STEM and other fields. So I would like to ask you, you're a professor, you deal with students like me all the time. And, how did they react to films like the Bengal Files or Kashmir Files? And how would you compare that with an outsider perspective on India, such as Slumdog Millionaire?
Thank you. Very appropriate question. Thank you, Vivek ji. It's very inspiring to be in the company of a practitioner of media arts, whereas all I do is I exhort my students to learn the theory and practice both and go out and change the world. Uh, I wanted to build on what you said actually about the importance of youth and also connect it with my experiences teaching, well, for year after year, 18 to 22-year-old students who many of whom become journalists or filmmakers or human rights activists. So the story of Indian representation, Indian cinema in American colleges, in American campuses, is in a way an extension of what Vivek ji, I think, just said about the small town versus elite metro divide that you see in India. It's playing out on a global scale. And I think it's magnified now in the last few years, because if in India the attitude to youth by the government or by the media industries or by education is a somewhat condescending one, where youth or youth cinema is seen as frivolous, whereas you made the decision to say, no, these are people whose intelligence needs to be respected. And let's tell them these stories as harsh as they are, because these are stories about their parents, their grandparents, and tomorrow when they grow up and have children of their own, it's very important for them to know the truth. And I think in America, the crisis I see brewing for a long time and which has just exploded in the last 2 or 3 years in particular, I would say, is this crisis of truth and the crisis of misplaced or misappropriated idealism. So if in India, youth are sort of, seen as largely youth entertainment or youth culture is seen as something that's frivolous, I think in America, the opposite has happened, where the youth media market, the youth education market, by which I mean college students, have sort of been turned into this, taking on this seemingly very serious role as the agents of change, making the whole world a better place and smashing oppression and injustice and bringing about equality and all these things, which on paper sounds good, right? It is your second lion. But what does the second lion mean when the first lion, namely truth, is a paper tiger? That is the crisis of the discourse in the United States today and in the West. So what I've seen happening in universities, for example, is that in the 1990s and early 2000s, when I was a grad student and when I first started teaching, in the universities and in some parts of the media, there was still the space to question authority, to question propaganda, to say, for example, that, hey, this war they're going to against Iraq, it's based on false premises and things like that. But now that has changed a great deal, because there is so much of self-righteousness based on false information that's being promoted, funded by very, very wealthy foreign lobbies. So we have this problem with the commodification of protest, the distortion of the realities of who's oppressed, who's poor, the relevance, if at all, of religious identities and caste identities to understanding this reality. So that is leading me back to what you asked me about. So what happens in a classroom in the United States when a movie like Slumdog Millionaire, which is a Western production on India, is screened, in comparison to, say, the Kashmir Files, or hopefully in the future when, I'm teaching my class again and Bengal Files is ready for screening on campuses. I'll tell you the story very briefly. So when I teach my Indian cinema class, I usually start with a Western movie about India. Like usually it's Slumdog Millionaire, or most recently we watched Monkey Man, also with Dev Patel. And, it's I see young students, many of whom are of non-Indian origin, and a few Indian origin students as well. They like the idealism, they like the underdog story, whether it's in Slumdog or in Monkey Man. But what they don't have is information like what we just saw in the prelude, that Bengal was colonized twice, partitioned twice, and the fact that India was colonized not once but twice. And that is something a lot of people don't even know, because people have been taught by their professors that India was colonized once by the British and that was it. And after that, the new face of colonialism in India is what they call Hindutva or Hindu nationalism. And there is so much of distortion going on, in my view. I mean, there can be debate, there can be growth, but unfortunately, what has happened is there has been such a deliberate obfuscation. So, for example, in Slumdog Millionaire, if you compare that to the novel Q&A, they went out of the way to change the identities of the characters, make sure the whole thing appeared like a unilateral aggression by Hindus against Muslims in India. And that movie, Slumdog Millionaire, also came out in 2008, just around the time the Bombay attacks were taking place. And it is so sad, but 20 years later, well, almost 20 years later, like last April, again, I'm teaching my Indian cinema class, the Pahalgam massacre takes place. And what happens in campuses, I know in some campuses, some of you actually held candlelight vigils, and that was commendable. I absolutely salute CYAN and Kona and all the other Hindu student groups and your friends who at least honored the memories of these victims. But in many colleges, students, faculty, and administrators did not even know. And why did they not know? Because when they looked at the headline in Washington Post or the Associated Press, it said, yeah, there was some shootout in Kashmir, indiscriminate firing. Whereas we all knew the reality. This was the same kind of horror that we saw in the in Kashmir Files, now in Bengal Files. So to just quickly wrap up on this question, what I've seen happening in my classrooms is that when you have the time and space to really get into these issues, and this is why I think humanities classes, humanities majors, conversations like this are very important, because you can't get this kind of learning by simply looking at a short video or getting on social media. You have to have conversations which go back and forth. And what I've seen happening in my classes, for example, is that when I screen and discuss a movie like, say, Mission Kashmir and the other romantic Kashmir movie which came recently, I forget the name, but which is completely whitewashing the Shikar, thank you, that one. And then Kashmir Files. And by the way, I have to mention this, Vivekji. So Kashmir Files, I think, released just when my semester was ending last time, 22. One of my students took an extension, not an Indian origin student, one a very bright student who has gone into journalism. He took an extension so he could go to Fremont, watch the movie in the summer holidays, and write a paper. And what he wrote in that paper was very interesting. He says, as a part African American, I can relate to what happened to the Kashmiri Hindus. And more than that, the way their suffering has been whitewashed. So it's very interesting from trying to learn that how the causes or the concerns we are talking about, for them, are progressive human rights concerns. But then the New York Times, Al Jazeera, Washington Post, they all frame what we are saying as far right or nationalist or something, rich people's concerns. So I think rich and poor, oppressor, oppressed, and ultimately truth and falsehood, right and wrong, and life and death, to invoke your three lions and Narasimha Swami, they're all at stake here. And which is why I think art of the kind that you're doing is very important, and reaching the audience, which after all is going to grow up. You're still learning. And how can you learn if you're not exposed to art? Right? I mean, as an engineering dropout, I'll say, I'm not asking you to drop out at all, but art is what moves you. So even if your main fields are in engineering, I would say watch movies like The Bengal Files and speak about it and tell your own stories.
There's so much to unpack there. So I want to ask a question about, you've spoken about the influences that you've been under when you were younger with the urban nationalism, and you've made movies on that too. What do you have to say when art is often trapped under the cages of such people and such influences, where they use it as a medium to convince people of these urban exile-like narratives and, brainwash people into thinking that India has this same sort of like a critical race theory template with the oppressed and the oppressor, and they kind of limit this indigenous civilization into that. What are your comments about trapping art into that?
Okay, so I mean, it's a classroom subject actually. It can take ages to explain it, but as I have understood, see, everything happens because of the market. If there's no market, nothing is going to happen. I personally believe that all religions exist because there is death. If I tell you you are never going to die, whatever happens, you'll never die, Will you care about God and religion? You won't. This is the truth, right? And similarly, whatever happens because of the market. And market, there are different kinds of market. There are markets of products. There are markets of votes, which is like active in India round the year. There is a market of ideas, and there is also a market of narratives. So, because of the World War, or as I understand, I'm not a scholar of that subject, but whatever I have understood in the field of communication, that there, this 5,000, let's say roughly if we take 5,000 years of human evolution, civilized world, when we had language or we started talking and started hunting and all, there has been kind of a war of narratives, or wars have taken place because of the narratives. And today, the biggest battle is war of narratives. And I can explain it. What is algorithm? If algorithm is the new God, okay, what this God is doing? This God is just dividing public opinion into two different narratives. And you are fighting. When you divide into two narratives, then you fight, you argue. And more you fight, more you argue, more engagement you have on the social media and apps and whatever. And more human behavior they understand, more data they have to sell. So we are all products in this market. Now, there are some people who are professionals. Their full-time job is to create narrative. When the World War was fought, it was very important to create a narrative of humanity, liberalism, and human rights, and all those kind of things. If those who do not know, let me just elaborate. You can research it after we finish. US government, CIA, yeah, CIA, na? CIA called top Hollywood studios and funded them to create a narrative using the films, using Hollywood as a soft power for America. And what these most films were about, that America is the best place for humanity. America has liberty. America is number one democracy. America is number one country. So through narrative, they established themselves as world's number one country. But on so many parameters, any student of economics or military or whatever, political science, you know that America is not number one in most of the parameters. In most of the indicators, in some it's 3, 4, some 50, but it's not number one. And on what basis you say it's number one democracy? It's a great democracy. Even I love this democracy. I don't know if anymore, but yes, I do. I did. But it's not number one. And America is not the savior of the world. Definitely not. But since then, Hollywood has been creating movies where the world is jeopardized, there is danger, there's a threat, and America ends up saving it. Be it American president or a president of Congo or president of any other country. And they stereotyped in that narrative very smartly what they did. That in Hollywood movies, a Chinese person will always be stereotyped in a certain way. An Indian will always be stereotyped in a certain way. An Indian you will find doing these technical or clerical jobs in all the films. Okay. Africa, they'll show Africans only as poor people who perhaps do not even have a language and uncivilized people. So they stereotyped everything. You see their web series, and there's the minute they go to Thailand, you'll find everybody is like bending a little, very melodramatically, and everybody is worshipping Buddha, which is not true. Atheism is fastest growing religion in Asia now. So they control the narrative. They control the narrative of fashion. They control the narrative of music. And through all these things, they made everybody believe. Today you go wherever in Africa, go Japan, Asia, rest of the countries, Latin America, ask any child who doesn't know anything, who doesn't even go to school, ask that child that which is the number one country in the world, he'll end up saying USA. And if you ask him if something goes wrong in your country, who's going to come to save you? He'll say USA, because he's exposed to those movies. Now, hip-hop, okay. Everywhere in the world, you must have seen lots of videos on Instagram, these kids who don't even go to school, poor kids in Africa, all of them are making such wonderful hip hop. This thing, India has. I mean, there's no reason why hip hop should be so popular in India, but hip hop has killed Bollywood music. Hip hop has killed classical music. It has destroyed everything. The third thing, the power of narrative. I'm not against anything, so please don't judge. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just analyzing. Third thing, you see, America was at the forefront of uh, globalization. Now, what does globalization actually mean? Globalization actually means that you have to sell your products to the world. It was very difficult to sell your products to the world because you speak different languages, people have different habits. In India, ganne ka ras, sugar cane juice sells the most, and the nibu pani, that sells the most. How do you sell Coca-Cola over there? So you have to change habits, you have to change values. The minute you change habits and values, you are changing the culture. So basically, you have to attack cultures of every country. And you have to have one language, one visual imagery, standardization and uniformity. Okay, if you're from India, you know America is the most uniform and standardized country in the world. I can blindly go to any office, any house. I know where is the restroom, where is food, how it's placed, where are glasses, what comes first, when the cups. It's all template-based life, which is wonderful. But then, in the name of globalization, a narrative was created that globalization is the best thing to happen to humankind. But what have we achieved after that? That we have destroyed local cultures. If you see this emergence of right wing all over the world, people are saying, even America got trapped in the same vicious cycle. Today, they have to fight their election saying, make America great again. And that's exactly what every country is saying today. I was in Thailand some time back, they were saying, make Thailand great again, in different words, Japan is saying, our economy is stuck, let's make Japan great again, go back to 80s and 90s Japan. India also, our Prime Minister is all the time saying, I'm making India great again. French President says, let's make France. Why is everybody saying that? Why people are feeling that culture is attacked? Because of this uniformity and standardization. So, today, we are living in a world where most of the companies, the only job they have is war of narratives. They are fighting there. So, urban excellence actually was the term coined very academically. It was misused by lots of people in politics. What I meant to say was, there are some people who are professionally, trying to capture your mind. They want to influence your mind all the time by bombarding you, carpet bombing information all around you. And therefore, you start believing in things which have no basis for you to believe in. And that's very dangerous. And the first victims, who are the first victims? The students. Because if I capture mind of young people, it's more powerful than an atom bomb. I can make them do anything. And the danger is that sometimes these narratives are used to use people's mind to wage a war against the state, against your own culture and civilization. India faces this problem very badly. We are one of the oldest and continuous civilization. Today, we just speak, but when I go to any place in India, I wonder, where is that civilization? Where is that culture we are so proud of? What is that culture? Everybody wants to speak English. Everybody cuts the cake. And the Indian culture is that when on a birthday, you should jyoti jalani chahiye, you light something. But all these people who are Twitter warriors or Instagram or WhatsApp warriors, they talk about Indian culture, but all of them are blowing candles off. Jyoti bujha rahe hain sab log. So in every country, people are facing that problem. So that's how urban excels came in. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. I think it's a great quality, but not in modern world. The middle class India in smaller towns, which is more vernacular and not very English speaking, where you're not going to convent school, those people are just concerned about, those families are just concerned about raising their children so that somehow they get a job, mostly in Google and Microsoft, and so that they get American visa and come to study here. That is the Indian middle class dream now. Again, no culture over there. That's been destroyed. So mostly our cultural values and the things which give us sense of pride have been destroyed. by some narrative. Okay, and that's why I keep talking about it all the times. I go talk about Indian civilization, Indian culture, and when I say Indian this thing, I don't generally people connect it with Hindutva and all, but I am a religious person, so I'm not saying I'm an atheist, but I'm a religious. It doesn't matter to me. But at the same time, I am most religious person because I don't believe in any religion. That's why that makes me the most religious person in the world. But I'm very proud of great Hindu philosophy. That philosophy of Tattvamasi, which means you are the God. We have such great things to create a very powerful narrative. But somehow our dream is only to pick up a job and not fight in the marketplace of narratives, which you'll find communists and leftist people do it very smartly, very, very smartly. They get up in the morning, first thing they say is, okay, what narrative we have to create today? We get up in the morning and we say, okay, what's the gossip? Let's see what's happening in Bollywood. Okay, so yeah.
I would like to kind of direct that towards you. So, yes, urban Naxals is a term that was academically coined. So, going into the academic world, right? Obviously, there's such a huge dominance of these fabricated narratives, especially directed at the Hindu population. And you teach classes, you face that all the time. And we've also spoken about how I attempted writing a paper about Hinduphobia, and that didn't go so great because there's just such a limited access to scholastic resources. So I would like to know your perspective on, like, how do you think students should navigate in such a world where the scholarly world, the academic world is so dominated by these narratives? Like, I'm sure it was really difficult to make this movie because you'd have to ignore so many of these fabricated narratives, So yeah, that's a threat, right? Being canceled, with whether that's in your own social circles or in the academic world. Yeah, I'm sure you faced a lot writing your book. And so what's your advice, kind of going through that sort of a path?
Thank you for recognizing. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I get beaten on both sides, and I suspect with the kind of truth telling you're doing, it's happening to you a little bit at least. That's the bit I had some good. Yeah, that's what happens. See, when you wield your pen or your camera or your voice as a divine instrument, Tattvamasi, Saraswati, Swan, Narasimhaswami's paw or hand, whatever, claw, whatever it is, when you decide to put whatever little gifts you have in the service of something bigger than you. It could be because of a love of your parents or a love of your children, a love of truth, a love of democracy, a love of nature. Eventually, what happens is people will come along, forces come along. Like Vivek said, it's so marketized. So parties are also beneficiaries and creators of narratives. So they will try to hitch a ride with you and then take you along where they want you to go. So then what happens is, when you refuse to be a tool, you get cancelled on both sides, I guess. But having said that, I don't want to be that pessimistic. Let me just ask the room, can you raise your hand if you've ever used the word Hinduphobia in your life? You have a chance. It's sad that you had a chance to use that kind of... well, I was asking the students, and I know we're all students at heart, Pushpita ji, Vivek ji, and I, but is it a word that has ever been uttered by a professor in one of your classrooms? In a respectful or sympathetic way? After Pahalgam, after Mumbai, after... Well, see, so this is what I see happening. After the Pahalgam massacre, I did write an op-ed about what had happened in Pahalgam and the way the media had failed to represent it. And some of my students were kind enough to work on it with me and publish it in our campus paper. And so I'm kind of, like the crazy guy sitting under a tree and shouting about this one issue, which most of the other South Asia studies professors don't really seem to take an interest in. So now this, if you look at it in terms of a left-right thing, we come from a civilization, a philosophy, which doesn't see much of a difference in the left and right. You may think that, you're this and that, but we come from a place, we inhabit a cultural memory that's so old. You know, what we see happening, you have different political groups and ideologies which came out of European enlightenment and European colonialism, let's say 1700s onwards, all promising brotherhood of man, right? So the right says we'll do it through free markets and, things like that. The left says we'll do it through socialism, all of that. And what do they keep doing? They keep swinging back and forth. One revolution from the right, one from the left. You have Stalinism, you have Hitlerism, back and forth, back and forth. And that's why I think the reason we in India or Bharat or from the position of Sanatana Dharma are able to take a bigger view is very simply because we know that brotherhood of man doesn't happen without motherhood of God, or motherhood of the goddess. So to cut a long story short, I think when I started my studies in the 90s, I went to UMass, which was like the JNU of the East Coast. And of course, I must recognize the fact that, Puspitaji, Vivek, and I all studied on the JNU campus, so to speak. Not JNU itself, but we all studied at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, which was sort of where you went if you wanted to study media in those days in India. And it may be safe to say that all of us were treated predominantly to what today you might call a left or a progressive or a Marxist form of education. And I think we were, at least I was, open-minded enough not to react to it badly. I could relate to some of the compassionate things they were saying. I could relate to the critique of imperialism, for example, of cultural imperialism. In the 90s, many of my colleagues in academia who were Marxists were critical of globalization and the way indigenous cultures were being destroyed by Hollywood and the State Department or whatever. Now, what has happened since then is that the so-called left in academia has basically been completely co-opted by what they used to call the right-wing Nazi or whatever forces, which is that they've become tools of imperialism. So that is why today you don't find these people taking a word like Hinduphobia seriously, because Hinduphobia comes from the same space as indigenous oppression, ancestral traditions being threatened. So they don't want to even go there because it's going to it's going to collapse their whole pack of lies. So the way I see it, put truth over tribalism. That's kind of what I tell my students. I mean, I had a tough semester the last 6 months because a lot of things happening in the US and the world. Many of our students are very sympathetic to the Palestine cause, as you can imagine, and many US causes. I've written very, very critical pieces about terrorism and Hamas and the fact that what seems to American students or Americans here as a subaltern Robin Hood uprising to us looks more complicated because we see the existence of a deep religious imperialism in what they think is just white supremacy and brown resistance. Inside that so-called brown resistance, that there is a kind of theological supremacy, imperialism, all these things. So what I've been trying to do really is to make my classes a place where we all learn from each other, and I bring in real-world stories. I know we should open it up for questions. So I just want to share one story about my mother, and in fact, I should say that whenever I see your movies and I see you and Pallaviji together, I'm reminded of the world my mother brought me up in because she was very much busy in the film industry at that time in the 70s. Used to go to these National Film Award screenings, all these things. My mother, by the way, is Jamuna, famous Telugu actress, those of you might not know. Oh, yeah, my mother is Jamuna. So, that is my film. Thank you. More respect. Thank you. I didn't make it into the movies, but I made it into talking about movies, which is close, because my mom was a hard act to follow. And that's why I have so much respect for you and Pallaviji, and she fought for the truth. Thank you so much. I share one small anecdote which I tell my students in my Indian cinema class, because it connects all what we've been talking about. Film as an art, it's an instrument of social change in a good way. students, etc. So when I start my classes with the Slumdog Millionaire Western thing, what is wrong with it, the stereotypes, and then we go into 13 weeks of watching Indian movies, all the way from the old N.T. Ramarao mythologicals, the Palke silent movies, to the most recent emerging movies, and so on. One of the issues that comes up with is that the students typically expect a Western academic gaze on the movies, at least at first, because most of the other South Asia studies professors have already told them, when you watch an Indian movie, look for caste oppression, look for Brahmin men oppressing lower caste women, things like that. Those are the tools. And I say, look, I've had the privilege to have been born into a family where I saw movies being made. And my mom, by the way, was not quote unquote right winger or anything. In fact, she was introduced to cinema in 1950 by the Prajanatya Mandali, as progressive or communist as it gets in the 50s. But then she became most famous for playing the role of Satyabhama. And, with N.T. Ramarao as Krishna. So in my mom, I always had this example of somebody who was beyond left and right. She was in the Congress in the 80s. She also campaigned for the BJP briefly much later. So she was beyond left and right. And when I used to go to her public functions, I used to see, red scarf wearing, Naxalite singers, as well as saffron wearing Hindu gurus, and every shade of political figure on the stage with her. So I try to tell my students, look, this divide and rule, this left wing, right wing, Protestant, Catholic, this is a problem with your monotheistic history, sad to say. And I have to point out that I'm coming from a memory that's bigger. So the specific example I'll end with is that in 1999, just after I'd finished my PhD, I'd gone to Hyderabad to, pay my respects and to my parents. So we all went to a wonderful conference that was being held, I think at this one university campus where my dad used to teach. There was a conference on Telugu cinema that was being held. And for 2 or 3 days, I was going every morning, and all my friends from the University of Hyderabad were there. These are all, again, media educators, media professors, and students. And the papers are going on and all that, everything is there. Then on the third day, in the evening, in the same venue, the host, this was being held at the American Studies Research Center at OU. The director was retiring and called all of us for a retirement party. And for that event, my mother came. And, as soon as we came, my mother was recognized by all the security people, the gardeners, the chowkidars, the janitors, they all came running. They were all taking photos. They were enjoying it. And my mom was very amused. She saw all the posters for the conference that had been going. And she said, "Oh, is this where you've been coming for the conference?" I said, yeah, see, I'm a PhD. Me and my PhD academic friends, here we are doing film theory, critical theory, and all that. I'm feeling very proud that, my mom was seeing my work. And then, the story is going to lead to me getting humbled. What happens next was so beautiful. So one of the security people there, my mom's super fan, and the janitors, they all come, they take photos with my mom. And you know what they say? They tell my mom, 3 రోజుల నుంచి ఇక్కడ అందరూ వచ్చి సినిమా గురించి మాట్లాడుతున్నారండి, ఏమీ అర్థం కాలేదు. Which is, for 3 days, all these people are coming and talking about Telugu movies. We didn't understand one word they said. So, call me a populist, call me a nativist, a mother tongue fan, whatever. But that day I said, man, academia, critical theory, media studies, intellectuals, our so-called intellectualism, will all be useful only if we can have a dialogue with people like that fan of my mom, right? And I said, I swore that day, I will respect, I will learn from Marxism, critical theory, whatever, but I will not lose myself into that work. My job is as much as to make the subaltern heard, as they say, in the Ivy Leagues, in academia, So I don't know how I got started on that, but I'll just continue.
That's, again, so much to unpack, but let's just open up the room for questions, audience questions. If we have any, we'll take them. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's what would you tell American college student? What would you tell them India is? Because I feel like a lot of these they show the rise from people not understanding like what's part of India, what's not part of India, who does beach there to Islam to. So what would you define into like Western terms what India as a nation is? Some.
Okay, so you came to watch the film yesterday, right? I met you there. So towards the end of the film, there's a dialogue which the protagonist says. And he says, since I was thrown out of Kashmir, I've been wondering what India is all about. What is India? He says, मैं यही सोचता रहा कि भारत क्या है. He says, India is like Ganges, the river Ganga. Okay, where any river which comes and merges into it, any canal or any swamp or anything which comes, any water body which meets in Ganga becomes Ganga. You know, it's a metaphorically said. I think I've traveled all over the world, and I travel a lot, and I observe. Being a director, being a storyteller, I observe a lot. There is something about India which cannot be explained. And what is it? That is, nowhere in the world, you go to any country and you do critical analysis of that place, objective analysis, you may find a lot of diversity. Okay? Like in America, yesterday I was somewhere in LA, so they said Indian people live here, the Chinese live here, Indians live here. You'll find neighborhoods where all kinds of people from all over the world live. Even in your university, you'll find more diversity than anywhere else in the world. Okay? So on paper, you can say, yes, we have a lot of diversity. But there is a problem. All this diversity is very, very statistical and clinical. There is only one place in the entire world, there is one land where there is amazing diversity, but that diversity interacts with each other all the times. Now look at a day in Indian life, a life of an Indian, and compare it now, since you live in US or in any part of the West or even other Western countries or African countries. You can just mentally, you can travel all over and you can create a map in your mind. In India, when you get up in the morning, you start your interaction with somebody who speaks another language, comes from another geographical region, has a totally different economic strata. Maybe you are a millionaire and he is just a beggar. You don't know, your day can start like that. You end up talking to him. And interaction is not just like I go for hiking or walking here, whoever strangers, they smile and they say, hey, good morning and something. No, you ask him things. Kya chal raha hai, kya nahi chal raha hai, what's happening? He learns something from you, you learn something from him. You feel there is somebody for you. You feel wanted. You feel you belong somewhere. Throughout the day, a lot of people here say, when they talk about India, they talk only in terms of Hindu, Muslim. Okay. In one day, I interact with so many Muslims. I just cannot tell you. My taxi driver, and we end up talking. You sit in an Indian taxi, you talk. In an Indian auto, you sit and you talk. You go to a shopkeeper, you talk. You exchange notes. India is the only place where saints and sinners are exchanging notes 24/7. You know, though all over the world. But in India, they actually verbally they are doing it. I have never seen such interaction of diverse group of people every single day, all the times, all your life. Right? That, I think, is one of the greatest qualities about India. But to me, if you ask me personally, if tomorrow I have to extract two greatnesses of India, number one, I would say the quality to sacrifice, the value of sacrifice. Two, the first one I am telling you. What is the most difficult thing for anybody to do? Honestly, if you ask, what is the most difficult thing for a human being to do? Sacrifice. Ask anyone to sacrifice their time, not possible. Their car, their comforts, their ideologies. But your mother, an Indian mother, can change her ideology, change her values, change anything for you, right? Just think about your mothers, your fathers, and you are sitting here, think about their sacrifice. Your mother won't buy makeup, she won't buy good sari, she will eat whatever food is left. She may not eat also. She won't buy things she wants to buy. She won't even go and watch a film. She'll say, okay, let me save 300 rupees. And when your mother's, you guys are students, but you get married and you'll find your mother's traveling here, she'll save every penny to get something for your children, grandchildren. So much of sacrifice. One man in a house, joint families in India, he does a clerical job. He's a small time teacher, a clerk, but he raises his cousins, his brothers, his uncles and aunts, everybody's children. In one family, you'll find he raises 8 or 10 children and sends them to USA, IITs and USA. Not one, thousands and thousands of examples you'll find like that. So many people are studying abroad, doing so well, but he's still going in his cycle or on his scooter and he's still doing that hard work. That is the kind of sacrifice. You go, you are traveling, somebody will give you a seat, somebody will give you food, somebody will give you fruit. You know, so many things we sacrifice. So sacrifice is our DNA. It's part of our life. We may not smile too much at strangers. We may not say good morning and hello. But if the need be, you will end up sacrificing something. If your friend comes from somewhere, even an American friend or Chinese friend or whoever, you'll say, take my bed, sleep here, and I can sleep on the ground. No, this is one quality in hyper-capitalist world. This is like diminishing, not diminishing, it is almost dead. You can't find it anywhere in the world. And I'm telling from my personal experience. My biggest problem with the modern hyper-capitalist world is that nobody is willing to sacrifice even 1 second for anyone else. And I define who's rich. Somebody who can afford time. Okay, if you cannot afford time, you are not rich. You may be a billionaire, but you are not rich. The second quality about India, which I have experienced and observed, and you can correct me as students if I'm wrong. I have traveled, I used to have 7, 8 passports. Now I carry only one. Wherever I have gone and whichever country I go to, I consume that country. I observe, I consume it. I want to understand their culture, their values. Despite the language barriers in most of the countries, I like to wonder what these people are made about. I have noticed Indians are everywhere in the world. Almost every country, you name a country, Indians are over there. You go to any country and ask them that out of all the people who live in your country, which is one ethnic community you can fully trust. Right? In America, ask an American parent, if your daughter is traveling at night alone and she needs a ride, and people from country A, country B, country C are going past, who should she trust to take a ride at night? Very often you'll find they will say Indian. Indians can be trusted. What is the biggest problem in this world today? What is the number one crisis of this world? Can anybody tell me, your students? What is this world's number one crisis? Like a pandemic, what's number one crisis? Right, trust deficit. That is the biggest crisis. Nobody trusts nobody in this world. So in the modern world, if you can be trusted, I think that is the biggest wealth you can have. Am I right? So sacrifice and trust. These are the two values. So far, I won't say they're intact 100%, but mostly in middle class India, in poor class India, you will find these qualities. I'm not saying rich class India, because rich class all over the world has only one value. So they don't have any other culture or value. So that's what I think, trust and sacrifice and inclusivity, which means you merge, you become one. It's not that you have separate entities. Indian, when you get married in India, they say, now you're one forever. So which means becoming one. Friends also, when two friends in India, you'll find they become one. So this concept of oneness, of suchness, philosophically speaking, suchness, otherwise oneness, and sacrifice and trust. This is what I think India, I would like to define as.
Vivek, I think I also discussed with you what I wasn't aware of by action that they born brought up in India also. And I even studied ICSE syllabus, started in CDSE to say, even the professor is here, like CDSE has French and everything, but ICSE. I still remember because I somehow got to have a little bit of what is it memory that all it was about the confidence of negative words that this confidence happened, second confidence. It was all talked about confidences, but not of the massacres. Only the people studying about massacre, that will be handling a small target that's overnight. So we were never aware of this, even though we were aware of a couple notes or something that was mentioned, it would be just in numbers, and it would just remain a number. We hardly did see, like, the visuals that was showed that they touches back then with just those numbers or something. And then there was something about controversial, like how Subhash Chandra Bose that even Shastri and even the emergency and everything. I want teachers used to be like, that is very controversial topic, your students are not touching them. So that's how we got better. And although I love history, I never, if someone comes and asks me, what is your take on Gandhi or what is about the partition and everything, I probably also never went and researched because actually, you're very controversial topic and everything. So yesterday when I was watching a movie, also someone next to me was discussing this concept with me. And she was saying, parents and it's the system that needs to be very supportive of this. But at the same time, I'm sort of thinking, is it also equally my mistake because that we hear that thing was written in terms of controversial topics? Even if we are just one person among all the people who are talking, like, who has a different ideology, we can okay, can't open up and speak, and maybe there's surprises. So what I wanted to know, because since yesterday after watching the movie, it was bothering me, is it also equally my mistake that I never said didn't hear about?
No, I won't say it's your mistake. Absolutely not. I mean, definitely not your mistake. You were not born in 1946, not even 47 or later on. Not your mistake. But I think there are two ways to look at it. One is a political way to look at it. And the second is more anthropologically or more socially, social science way to look at it. I think collectively, Indians try to avoid taboo subjects and controversial subjects. What do your parents say? अरे झगड़ा हो जाए तो किनारे चले आना, तुम मत जाओ. Okay. Just to give you an example, since there are lots of girls here, and all of you were born and brought up in India? You were born and brought up in US? No? How old were you when you came here? You were born and you in India? In you. So which you were born and brought up in India?
Yeah, immediately.
When you were 9, okay. You? In India. Okay, so in India, when a girl becomes almost 14 or 15, when she's going through the change, and most of the mothers in India tell their daughters that walk like this, droop your shoulders. Okay, in West, they say walk with erect shoulders. Okay, straight. Why do they do that? They say take this chunni, they take a drape, what is it called? Dupatta, dupatta. Why do they do that? Because they know that there are eve teasers, there are gundas, there are boys who are going to tease you, who are going to make offensive, vulgar comments at you. So why get involved in that? It's better that you shy away from that. Don't confront. This is very symbolic thing, but this speaks a lot about the collective psyche of middle class in India. What do they tell their boys? You don't, even if somebody abuses you, slaps you, it's fine. क्या बिगड़ जाएगा, एक झापड़ खा लोगे, पर तुम झगड़े में मत पड़ना. And never get involved in with police and all these things. That is the collective psyche of middle class in India. And that's why we don't like to get into any kind of controversy, because getting involved in a controversy in India means fighting with the system. And it's such a rotten, broken system. Yesterday in my film, you heard that dialogue. That girl says, you didn't see the film. You understand a little bit of Hindi? Thoda bahut Hindi samajhte?
Everybody.
But you understand. So she says, one girl tells the other girl, young girl, and she says, something, we the people, why should we be scared of anything? We the people. She says, कौन से we the people? कौन से लोगों की बात कर रही हो? डरने वाले लोग या डराने वाले लोग? पुलिस स्टेशन जाने वाले से डरने वाले लोग, बेटी पैदा हो जाए तो डरने वाले लोग, बेटी की शादी हो जाए तो डरने वाले लोग. The thing is that everybody is scared. And that's why you will find the most common words used by at least more than 1.23 billion people in India. What are the famous words? Malik, बड़े लोग, सेठ जी, हमारे गरीब घर पे आइए, हमारी कौन सुनेगा, जाएं तो जाएं कहाँ. You know, people feel very helpless. It's because of the system. And that's why they like to stay away from it. If you get stuck, what happens? So why should we talk about direct action? Second thing is, India's greatness also becomes India's weakness. Sometimes. Okay, all these values, great values which we are taught about, forgiveness, gratitude, forgetting bad things, moving on with life, non-violence. Okay, all these things are great values, but they also, we have taken them to such an extreme that they have become handicaps. They have become our biggest weaknesses. That's why I say in modern world, in today's world, where algorithm is the God, can you believe it, is dividing, polarizing you all the time. If you are not left, you have to be right. You cannot be in the center. If you are in the center, you don't exist. That's the truth. I'm very active on social media. I know that. Now, families have started talking like that. Friends have started talking like that. Everybody is talking in binaries, and if you're not this, you have to be that. That deduction they are taking. And in Hindu philosophy, what we have given, our philosophy is what? Neti neti. Nor this, nor that. This is also untrue, that is also untrue. And now we'll find the path of truth by saying this is not true, that is, left is not true, right is also not true. And above all, the entire Hindu philosophy, if you see the core of Hindu philosophy is Shiva's third eye. Right? What is that third eye? What is that metaphor for? What is that symbolism? Your right eye looks at the left. Your left eye looks at the right. Right eye sends messages to the left brain, right? And that's why there is so much of conflict and confusion in the film. You're always observing either from your left eye or right eye, something is heavy. Look, पूछते ना, are you left brain or right brain? Arey, what kind of a question is this? Isn't it? That's why the third eye. When there is no left and there is no right, when there is no binary, when there is not this eye or that eye, then you have the third eye. थोड़ा और deep जाऊं Hindu philosophy में? Okay. So there is a concept in the entire world believes how binaries work and how Hindu philosophy is unique. I won't say great because people get offended, but why it's so unique and special, it should be declared as world's knowledge heritage, heritage knowledge. The entire world is divided into the scenario or the scene and the observer. There is something going on and somebody is observing. So observed and observer. That's what most of the philosophies are limited to. Now in modern times, that distance is also gone. Now everybody is a scene himself. सब कैमरे लेके खुद ही को shoot करते रहते हैं, तो there is no observed, there is no observer. Observer is the observed and observed is the observer now. But that was in light humor. In Hindu philosophy, that's the only philosophy you can check in the world which talks about a third concept, and that is of a drishta. The seer. We say now we are seekers. The seer. The seer is seeing the observer and the observed both, which means I am seeing myself observing something else. So I detach myself. Now, what is that third? So this third eye, this seer concept, these are very special concepts, Where did we start from? Sorry. But that's...
I see it.
Yeah. So the problem is that in India there was a trade-off. Okay, the communists were very strong powers at that time. there was a trade-off sometime in the 60s and 70s mostly. I mean, I am saying it. The government, Indira Gandhi's government came on minority votes, so it was weak government. They needed outside support. So they took support from the Communist Party of India. And in trade, Communist Party said, you keep defense, you keep finance, you keep economics, whatever you want to keep, just give us three, four departments. And that was education and culture and all the narrative building this thing. And the first thing they did was they attacked on caste system, this. So they basically exposed the fault lines. They tried to convert India has lots of shades of grey. I mean, there's no binaries in India. ये भी सही है, अच्छा वो भी सही है, ये भी सही है, ये भी गलत है, वो भी गलत है. Your parents also talk like that. But they said no. They changed the entire narrative to oppressor and oppressed, zamindar and the landless labor. But between landless laborer and zamindar, landlord, in India there are so many categories of farmers you cannot imagine. 100 categories, so I know. Okay, but they ignored all those categories. They just said the war is between these two. And this guy definitely oppresses. The second narrative they created was that the majority necessarily, without fail, oppresses the minority. So which means Muslims are marginalized. That was given as true. And that's what the West believes in. But now let me give you an example. Okay, in Noakhali, Muslims were in majority. Okay, Hindus were killed. In Calcutta, Hindus were in majority. Muslims were in minority. Hindus were killed. In Kashmir, right, who was in minority? Hindus were in, initially they were in majority, they were reduced to minority. They were in minority. But the world believes that no, Hindus were wrong. Kashmiri Pandits were wrong. Something was wrong. They escaped or whatever happened. Nobody, terrorists, India has faced more terrorism than any other country in the world for last, since 80s. It started in 80s. So now 45 years of terrorism. Pahalgam is the recent example. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in terrorism. I live in Bombay. In Bombay, there were 11 bomb blasts. In America, if in New Manhattan, there are 11 bomb blasts. They will not let the world forget or sleep forever, you know. That's the power of their narrative. But nobody cares. So many thousands of people died in India. Okay, terrorism. But it's impossible to speak against terrorists in India. Yasin Malik used to walk into Prime Minister's offices. Hundreds of photographs I used in Kashmir Files also. He was given Youth Icon Award by India Today Group. Can you believe it? All these movies he was talking about, Mission Kashmir, Fiza, Fana, Haider, Roja, all these films are made on Kashmir in the same period, 80s and 90s. They don't even mention Kashmiri Pandit. And all of them justify terrorists कि उसकी बहन के साथ कुछ गलत हो गया था, so he picked up gun. ये हो गया था, तो he picked up gun. They are always talking about that some injustice happened, that's why they picked up the gun and therefore it's justified. So my question is, in India there is so much injustice against women and the Dalits. Does anybody pick up gun? Nobody picks up gun. If all of them pick up guns, will it be justified? So that is the problem. So communists took over the narrative. Let's see, the narrative has to change. I'm making these movies. Maybe they will bring about some change. I don't know. That's a long answer, but then I got carried away.
Would the not try to like that? That was
Yeah.
yes, dear.
Yeah. See, in an earlier answer, you mentioned about Indian culture. You were talking about the uniqueness about the Indian philosophy and, you know, how broad it is and everything of that sort. But if we were truly so rooted culturally, why do you think India was the victim of so many invasions? And why is it that we had to go to all that trauma and the splitting up of India? We were truly so culturally strong and had such a high philosophy.
Okay. Now this is a very subjective question. You'll find lots of different answers and lot has been written on this also. I'll tell you what is my analysis. And as I say, there were two kinds of groups in this world. Okay, initially, one who were conquering the geographical continents. Right. So West, mostly the Western countries, they went on to conquer the geographical lands, the continents of the world, resources of the world, the more physical resources of the world. That was their campaign. In the East, India was the major civilization. Bharat was the major civilization. We were conquering our minds. We were trying to understand what is this mind all about? What is this world all about? What is beyond life? What is beyond this universe? Can you believe it? Even till now, the most of the world talks about universe. Now science talks about it. We have been talking about multiverses. Not from today. Thousands of years ago, most of the Upanishads you find, we talk about multiverses. Isn't it? Now science is talking about it. Not science, and now we are seeing through telescope, we know that. So we were conquering our minds. We were trying to understand what's going in our mind. And that is the reason there's the world which was observing the physical side of the world. That's why they're so objective, the West is. Great thing. We need both actually. We say, no, we are better. No, we need both. So they became very objective people. That's why will find in the West, everybody talks in terms of where are the facts, what is the evidence. They are so good with cataloging things, putting everything in a template, immediately putting things in a system, because they were conquering, they were marching, they were army, they had to fight with different armies. They were going in oceans. We never did that. What we were doing? We tried to understand life. We internalized everything. That's why you see the modern medicine is evolved by observing dead bodies, by cutting dead bodies. That's how modern medicine evolved. But yoga and Ayurveda evolved by observing living bodies. And just by observing living bodies, they understood how many nerves we have, how many bones we have, how many muscles we have, what we do, so what will happen, what we eat, so what's going to happen. It's a very slow thing. Ayurveda and all is very slow. Yoga is the slowest thing. But they are not, they are lifestyle medicines. Okay? And these are preventive medicines. I mean, you have a symptom, so you go and take a medicine. These are two different sciences. In my mind, we need a best combination of both. We cannot exclude. But the world goes about, no, allopathy is the best and Ayurveda we don't care about. Ayurveda people will also say, no, allopathy doesn't do, we do everything. That's not the right approach. So I think that was the reason people came. I said we always welcome guests. People came, the invaders came. We were not prepared to fight that kind of war. It was, suppose somebody comes with nuclear bombs and you are still fighting with revolvers and guns and swords. How are you going to fight them? How many people came in East India companies? A few thousands. And we couldn't even fight them. Again, the trust. In Malabar, I know it for sure. I've done a lot of research on Mopla thing. So there's a place in Kerala called Malabar. So these Arabic merchants used to come. You know how they started capturing that? They would come there, marry the local girls, have kids, and they will leave. Okay. And all the property then was written on their kid's name. Mopla means, they were called Moplas. The reason they were called Moplas means, the literal translation is, the most respected guest. And those Moplas then committed a genocide of Hindus in Mopla, and they killed tens of thousands of people. Dr. Annie Besant, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, all those people have written about Mopla genocide. So this is how it happened. But when you read history in black and white, it looks like one day Babur came, he attacked on that day and he invaded. It never happened like that. It all happened slowly, inch by inch, like I said, inch by inch demographies changed. Same thing happened in Kashmir. That's how we got partitioned. Same thing is happening in Bengal. India's geographical area in kilometers is reducing almost every single year. And India is shrinking. It's shrinking because we are very inward-looking people. So our greatness has become our biggest weakness now. So that's why I say in modern times, you have to assert. You have to have the power of narrative. That's what I...
Vivekji, I have a question. So you were talking about narrative building right now, right? So one of the things that has happened which has caused a lot of Hinduphobia is because a majority of the Indian audience has lost the cultural significance and knowledge of the culture itself, of what Hinduism is and all that. How long do you think it will take, and what do you think is needed to bring that back, in terms of, you can only not have phobia towards something when you know it properly. So, and I see that there's like a lack of knowledge, because there's like still a lot of orthodox beliefs, and the orthodox beliefs are the ones which take people away from the Indian rooted cultural systems and bring them to the Western concepts. So what is needed, and how long would it take to reverse that?
See, he's the best person to answer Hinduphobia, but all I can tell you is, see, I'm not an expert in how long it will take and how it's going to happen, but I personally believe that uh, that is very, very important to create a grand Indian narrative. How Korea did, they use their entertainment as soft power. And I hear all the times, lots of people, Indians, they keep talking to me. I say, where are children? They've gone to attend some Korean concert, in New York or here and there. They're traveling, people are traveling. Netflix, some of the biggest shows are Korean. We have 100 years of cinematic history, but still we have not been able to make that mark. But there's one problem in today's India, there's one problem. Okay. I have a feeling that in our, we want to correct history, we want to correct the narrative, but we are becoming very enemy centric. And we have started mimicking the people we don't like. We say, they are monotheists. We are polytheists. We believe in diversity, we believe in inclusivity, we believe in including people, becoming one. When somebody asked Maharshi Ramanna, the great Bhagwan Ramanna also is called, when a BBC journalist asked Maharshi Ramanna, Bhagwan, how to treat others? He said, there are no others. Can you ever find a monotheist talking like that? So in India, India's biggest problem is Muslim invasion. Okay, Islamists and Islamic politics. But my problem is, with this new wave of activism, is that we have started mimicking them. We have started behaving like them. They do this, so therefore I'm also going to do that. Which I think is very, very short-term, very, very myopic view. I am of a different, my attitude is different. I say this is what they are doing, now let's draw a much bigger line. I don't want to talk about what they do. I just want to talk about our greatness. When you live out of your own ability, out of your own strength, you have longevity. But when you become enemy-centric, it's a lose-lose game. It's like in America, I was reading the other day, a millionaire got divorced, and the court said that the property has to be, they had a big, huge ranch house or something like that, running into several millions, that you have to divide half-half. So the court said, then you sell the property and divide it into half-half. So the husband sold it for $1 because court never told him how much you have to sell it for. That is enemy-centric behavior, because you want to hurt the other person and therefore you are going for your own loss. India now should focus on creating their own narrative rather than ignore it. Just ignore. The best way to fight the forces you don't like is to ignore them. But we are focusing, and it's happening because of the politics of India. Today's politics of India, see, don't mind it. I know, you may not like what I'm going to say now. No politician in 5,000 years has ever helped the masses. No politician in the world. Nobody. If even one politician would have helped the masses, there wouldn't have been inequality. So many problems would have been solved. The reason is because politics cannot solve any problem. Socrates said this many 2,000 years ago. He said that all democracy will become mobocracy. They gave him poison. And if I say this today in India, they will kill me also. You cannot say that. Yes, politicians are good for whatever they are supposed to do, creating narrative, defense and all that. But when it comes to the civilizational aspect of it, the cultural aspect of it, the literature aspect of it, politicians are helpless. They just cannot do anything. Now, unfortunately, in India, I don't know why we have given the contract of our culture and civilization also to politicians. They are now telling us what to wear, what to eat, how to do prayers. No, they have no right to tell me what I have to worship, how I have to worship, what culture I have to follow, what music I should say, what stories I should tell. And mark my words, ultimately we are going to suffer because of that. That's why you were asking me why I talk to young people. That's why I talk to young people. Read Hindu philosophy, not these ritualistic religions, tilak laga liya, ye kar liya, wo kar liya, Jai Shri Ram bol diya, usse kya milne wala hai? But when you read great philosophy, then you are closer to the science, you are closer to the knowledge. Hindu philosophy says you are God, and every particle of your body has the same power as the power of the universe. What does the particle science say? Exactly the same thing. What is the cosmic dance of Shiva? Cosmic dance of Shiva is that when he's there, he's not there. When he's not there, he's there. You look at him, but he's not there. Correct? And when you see he's not there, he's actually there. That is the cosmic dance of Shiva. And what is the particle science and all these big tubes where they study the particles? What's happening? When it's static, it's dynamic. When it's dynamic, it's static. When you see it, it's not there. When you don't see it, it's there. Same thing. Read Hindu philosophy. You will feel very proud. It will give you roots. It will give you reason to be proud of. Rituals are not going to take anywhere. That's where I think India is going wrong. That's my personal opinion. And you can criticize me forever. But I am there. I'm facing. And that is the reason. Just 10 seconds, I'll finish. That is the reason in last 10, 15, 20 years, 25, and please don't connect it with the political parties or the politics. I'm talking about the systematic politics of India. In last 20 years, please tell me 5 great poets, great philosophers, great writers, great dancers, great people in classical music, great filmmakers, and great actors, which means somewhere the creativity, culture, art, literature is suffering. We are finding a false sense of pride at the cost of these things. What you are losing, you are not realizing. What you are gaining, it's all, it's a facade. It's a spectacle which is coloring our mind. You are seeing a spectacle and you are feeling that everything is fantastic. But at what cost that spectacle is taking place? At the cost of the soul of a society, which is art, literature, creativity, and philosophy.
Okay, that's a hard act to follow now. I wanted to respond to 2 or 3 things. I mean, you answered this insightfully. So I want to summarize it. So I think you're almost at the end. So I'll summarize. I'll say there are 3 things which perhaps will speak to your question and your concern about ICSE history, which I remember was beautifully packaged, by the way. But it's only when you start critically examining your assumptions you realize what the stories are leaving out. And in regards to your question, I think one of the challenges of our time is, when you look at things happening around you, it's very easy to say, oh, there is this insistence on orthodoxy, on traditions, on rituals, etc., which is unrealistic or unsustainable or unscientific. And, breaking free will sort of help us revive the, glory of Bharat and things like that, help us catch up to the modernity that was delayed or denied to us by conquest and, all these things. And as Vivekji just said, I think the most unnecessary profession in the world is that of the politician. I mean, consider the misuse of language, misuse of national resources. Sometimes these Instagram clips will come. Some politician is coming, 100 security guards, 100 cars. Why? What does that person do? Or take another politician, a dynastic politician, who is the son or grandson of two generations of politicians, who became very powerful and wealthy by saying, we are against dynastic inheritance of priesthood, because these Brahmin priests have oppressed you for 5,000 years. So here we are to create equality and give everybody a fair chance. So they cut off all the traditional patronage, which allowed traditional Vedic learning, Ayurveda, eco-sustainable practices around the temple, all of these things which flourished for thousands of years, even during these violent monotheistic invasions. They destroyed all of that under the name of democracy and equality and social justice. And then they say, oh, your Sanatana Dharma is a disease, like malaria, and we're going to eradicate it. And this is like the second or third generation of people who are inheriting vast, disproportionate capitalism level, hyper-capitalism level wealth and power, which no Brahmin or no Kshatriya or no Raja perhaps in India even had, right? So look at the amount of resources they've extracted from Bhudevi. They've hogged it. They've destroyed nature to do it. They've broken relationships. They've broken the fabric of trust. They have freed, the traditionally inherited arts, Natya Shastra, systems of patronage. One of the greatest stories I learned from Professor Arvind Sharma's book, The Ruler's Gaze, is when the Sati controversy and debate was taking place around the 1850s. One of the things that happened was that there were these widows who were being supported by a pension from the Maharaja somewhere. The British cut off that pension. They forced the Raja to cut it off. The widows immolated themselves in protest. The British press spun it into saying the Brahmins forced these people to do sati. So that is the level of propaganda and falsehood that has been coming down, decade after decade. So I want to highlight what Vivek said, that, the thing that is most precious and valuable in our society is still the idea of trust, the idea of confidence, that there is somebody for each other. The first movie I did my research project on in the 90s, by the way, was Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, which ends with the slogan Hum Aapke Hai. Now, a lot of my fellow academics criticized that movie, saying it's patriarchy and upper caste and Hindutva. At the end of the day, when I did my audience research, you know what the common man, the common woman, the ordinary people who watched the movie said? They said that movie was about sacrifice, and that's who we are. We are not about some slogan about being modern or being traditional. We sacrifice, we are there. Hum aapke hai. So to put this, and our strength is also our weakness, as Vivek said. We are so trusting, we are so forgiving, we have such a short-term memory, we are denialists. We won't deny Hinduphobia when it hits us in the face, or we will say Hinduphobia is because they are envious of our prosperity, not realizing that there are other communities in America 1,000 times wealthier than the Hindus. We are well-paid clerks or engineers or professors or whatever, most of us. And the few of us who are perhaps wealthier beneficiaries of capitalism and so on are not in the game of, purchasing and shaping narratives. People buy buildings in Harvard or other campuses perhaps, but they're not setting up a scholarship for you to spend the next 10 years answering your own question, right? Nobody, where is the patronage for actual scholarship in Hindu history or humanity, or for filmmakers, or for writers? So just to give you something you can take away with, something very simple, I think there's a 3-aspect pursuit, or 3-dimension, 3 kinds of learning, I think, that are necessary for all of us. One is, like you said, the return to the focus on Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma or the philosophy of it, the knowledge, which in India, of course, now they're calling IKS or Indian knowledge systems. I would call it Indian knowledge traditions, because these are about the Hindu identity or the Hindu as a group. You need to understand, like all indigenous groups can be understood only in time, the time axis, not in space axis. Right? Modern mass societies like the nation state, nationalisms, tribalisms, monotheistic cults, these are organized in space. The way they come about is they break your sense of the past. In, like, for example, the concept of the Jahil. Right? Before a certain prophet came, there was only savagery in the earth, before the fall. And the same thing happens, if you read George Orwell's 1984 or any post-apocalyptic novel you like, right? It always begins with this breaking from the past. Nobody knows what existed in the past. Winston Smith in Orwell's 1984 sees a picture of a church. He doesn't know what that building is. So even the history of Christianity has been erased from itself. So you and me are still living in a society, in families, with a thin thread of memory where we can look at a temple and say, hey, this is where my ancestors worship. This deity, this thing you call idol there, saw my great-great-grandparents, and hopefully they'll see my descendants too. So whether you believe in past life and say in some past life I was at this temple and they know me, they know where my atmas come from and where it's going to go through ultimately when I get moksha, whether you look at it that way or just logically in terms of your ancestors being there, our threads are all in time. Our society today, including the so-called right wing, the so-called nationalists, unfortunately, they're breaking the threads. They're saying, give up your attachment to the past, give up your attachment to traditions. Irrational, dogmatic, hurtful, hateful orthodoxy or progressivism are all bad. I'm not defending that. But you can't have a Sanatana Dharma cause. You can't understand the hatred that we saw in Bengal or Kashmir or today without recognizing the hatred is ultimately of people who've broken from the past, that people are still holding on to the past in some way. So if we were to give up our past altogether and say, hey, we just need to have this, like you said, this packaging of Hindutva or Bharatiyata and everything will be fine, that's not the thing. So we have to have, right, number one, we have to have the ITS or Sanatana Dharma, the philosophical core, our memory restored, pursuit of learning, arts, traditions, culture, etc. Thread number two, we do need something our ancestors didn't particularly invest in, including Gandhi, who was the biggest culprit or failure of this, at least, which is a failure to understand the people we are interacting with, right? And that's why Sitaram Ghole's book, all his books are very, very important. S.N. Bal Gangadhar's work is very important because we are only beginning to do like an Indian social sciences of the West. Otherwise, see, when I was doing my PhD, all my understanding of colonialism was through Middle Eastern people like Edward Said and Orientalists. Now that I've seen the people who were cut out of academia, like Sitaram Gole in the Voice of India School, and of course art like your movies, now you can see, hey, we are seeing something what way people we are living with are thinking. And not to demonize them, but just one, learning that we can survive, and also understanding how to liberate them from their erased memories and their things. Because if there's any people on earth, I don't mean to say this in a jingoistic or exclusive way, you still have grandmother's memories. Most of the people don't have memory of the day before. And it's induced that way. The school system, the factory schooling system, if you ever thought of why in the modern factory school system, everybody's divided into different class ages. Now, by contrast, we are watching this wonderful show these days called Cobra Kai. Karate Kids fans will like it. You see the mentorship. You see how this is how it is in nature. This is how it is in polytheistic society. People talk across generations. Our memory gets activated. You lock people up in classrooms with the same peers or in social media echo chambers. You will not know what came before. Somebody will come and lie to you and say, oh, your ancestors, your parents were the most oppressive, evil people. You'll believe it. So, two, we need that Westology. We need a critique of the West. The third and last thing I want to mention is a lot of us don't realize is very important, except if you're a writer or a teacher putting a lesson plan together, or a filmmaker, most importantly. These days we are consuming media so effortlessly, right? Social media, some AI, you some meme, something you're scrolling, you can abuse somebody, you can do whatever you like. But the amount of work it goes into creating a work like, the Kashmir Files or the Bengal Files or writing a book, there's a lot of effort. So what I think is very important is a kind of media awareness, a media literacy, understand the nature of each media. And that is where, I think we need to do this because 100 years ago, it didn't matter that much because you were still living in an environment where there was a temple and you could see, okay, there are some people who believe that your temple is bad. They want you to convert whatever your parents, accommodate. There's some accommodation is worked out, except in traumatic situations like Bengal or Kashmir or Goa or the Mopla massacres, etc. But now I think the conversion effort is not so much religious as so-called universal secularism. So for all of this to make sense, for all of us to really do what is right and hold on to what is still good in us, from our parents and for the next generation, we need to have all these three dimensions of knowledge, our past, our knowledge traditions, a philosophy that can, a critique of of the West and the world we live in, why they think the way they do, why they hate the past, why they divide us not only in terms of religion and caste and things, but also divide us in terms of generation. Actually, the media, right? There is an intimacy, there is a connection we have now because we are face to face, and it's the oldest, most primordial system of communication is spoken word. And now otherwise, when you look at the phone, what is talking to us is not you and me together. This is the algorithm, the algorithm got, this is the AI, it is the echo chamber, and most harmfully, it is this illusion we are carrying in our head. Because we don't know, because many of us in the last 10, 15 years, and I think this has been one of the big problems with the lack of emergence of a better or more coherent or persuasive or compelling Hindu narrative, is a lack of a better word, is most of it has taken place on social media the last 10, 15 years. And it's like building castles, made of sand. That is why, as someone who is making the effort to go out, take a whole team, and most importantly, take the wisdom. I remember when that noxious Israeli critic called Kashmir Files a propaganda movie, and I happened to write about it in the Indian Express. I just said, Vivek Agnihotri has mentioned that every single incident in the Kashmir Files was based on research. So why do you call that propaganda? Just because you didn't, glorify the jihadi terrorists?
We will keep it near.
Sorry, wrong one. I used wrong euphemism. Anyway, sorry. So I think the medium is important, language, the words you use, the images you use. So you've already honored your storytellers by showing up, and I should let someone else have the last word. Thank you.
No, it was great. There's so many I should ask the to find. Thank you so much for coming. It's excellent. Hopefully, and it's everything planned all for all of us. And I think it's achieving what you wanted to achieve, just the awareness and it started that fire of questions so we can go do our research on chapter professor our parents, our generations, and not let our story die. There was that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, don't blow off the candle on a cake. Light up new candle.
Yes.
Take one candle, light up another. So thank you, Pona. Thank you, Sana. Wonderful job for listening to us talk patiently. This was a very long, fast. But I have a request. I think all of us should go out and make a nice cook together.
Sure.
And sesame egg. Thank you.
Thank you.